This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, have you got yourself your PR podcast plug yet? We mentioned this at the top of almost every show. PR people are great at promoting their clients, and I'll just speak for myself, horrible at promoting ourselves. So this is an easy turnkey way to promote something that you do. It's not your 9 to 5. It's the thing that you do in your spare time. It's your passion project. Maybe you play a mean guitar, or you make a great sauce, or you have a newsletter, or you have a great social media feed that you want people to know about. Send your PR podcast plug along to jody@jodyfisherpr.com. Let us know what you're doing in your spare time with your passion project, and we will plug your thing at the top of an upcoming show. Now on with our show for today, we have got a very special guest. Greg Galant is the co-founder and CEO of MuckRack, the public relations management platform that helps PR pros find the right journalists to pitch, report on media coverage, and prove the value of their work. That's why we all get out of bed in the morning, right, guys? He's the co-creator and CEO of the Shorty Awards. We all know that. Which honor the best of social media, and he has launched the Work Remotely Forever Pledge, a commitment by business leaders who promise not to force their employees to work from an office. Since launching, more than 75 companies has signed on. He does that and so much more. Greg, welcome to the PR Podcast.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Jody.
Let's talk about your day job, MuckRack. You know, I am of the mind that there are lots of different platforms out there. I think anybody who's serious about doing public relations needs to access one of these platforms. So tell us what MuckRack does.
Yeah, so MuckRack is a PR software platform. It's all in one. We call it PRM, Public Relations Management. And it has a suite of tools with a few components. One is it helps you find the right journals to pitch, and then manages the whole workflow to help you manage all those pitches. So we have a search engine, a media database where you can search for any keyword or any term, figure out which journalists wrote about this the most, tweeted about the most, easy workflow to, once you find those super relevant journalists, add them to a media list, send them the pitch, connect your inbox so to the journalist looks like it's sent one-to-one, and it is. We help you kind of manage your templates, then customize every version of the template. We have a media monitoring solution, so you can monitor anytime your brand is mentioned online, in print, or even on television or radio. And then we have a whole reporting suite so that you can easily build reports about how much coverage your brand got compared to competitors, your key message pull through. And because we also track the relationship data from the pitching and any interaction you have with journalists, we can help you tell the whole story of, hey, you know, our brand got these results. We got more coverage than our competitors this year, more positive coverage than our competitors this year. And, you know, tie it all the way back to who did we pitch? What relationships did we build with journalists or podcast or newsletter writers to get there? And even connect to business outcomes by tying in systems like Google Analytics to see how much of an impact did getting that press have on your business metrics.
That sounds like you do a lot. And I'm familiar with MuckRack, and I'm familiar with the platform and lots of other platforms as well. It's my impression, and you correct me where I'm wrong, that MuckRack didn't really start out as the service you just described. It's kind of, and I'm going to use the word more organic, or even more social in a way. It was like a connector platform. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think organic's a great way to put it. So I got into this because I actually started a podcast in 2005, back when podcasts were just starting up, interviewing entrepreneurs, which now is a very common format, but at the time, no one had done it before. So I interviewed the founder of LinkedIn, when LinkedIn had 50 employees, the founder of Yelp, PayPal, Vanguard Group, a whole bunch of others. And one of the folks I had on my podcast was Ev Williams, who was working on a podcasting company called Odeo. Odeo didn't work out, so they pivoted to a little side project called Twitter. And that led me to sign up for Twitter way early. So I'm just at Gregory on Twitter. Not because I had a connection, just because no one else had grabbed it yet. So I kind of got to witness the whole birth of social media. And the first thing I noticed was there was no way to figure out like who's worth following on social media. So I had this idea along with my co-founder that we could launch a website where you could vote for who's the best on social media. We called it the Shorty Awards because tweets are short. And it was kind of a joke when we started, but within 24 hours, Shorty Awards was the top trending term on social media. This was back in late 2008, early 2009. That first Shorty Awards got an unbelievable amount of press. We got New York Times, Wall Street Journal, BBC, dozens of others all covered it. And I launched stuff before, and I know usually when you launch a new idea, it's really hard to get press, right? This is why people listen to your podcast and why everyone needs PR. We found though that the journalists found out about us really quickly, and we realized that journalists were using social media before most other people to figure out what to write about, promote their work, etc. So we launched the first version of MuckRack back in 2000, I guess April, or when was it? Well, I think April 2009, early 2009. And the original idea was just like, okay, well, there are all these journalists on social. It'd be cool if you could find them all in one place in a very easy way. We got the name because we took the idea of a muckraker, like an investigative journalist, a term that Teddy Roosevelt popularized in the 1920s. The idea of like a magazine rack or a news rack that you could like see all the news in one place. And $8 later on GoDaddy, which was our domain name budget, what it costs to register a domain name there, and really our entire branding budget. We'd registered MuckRack.com, launched a site, became very popular with journalists. And this first version, it was totally free. We weren't really thinking about the PR use case yet, but journalists loved it. We had over 10,000 requests to get listed on there. It became kind of like a who's who for journalists. Like the New York Times even linked to it on their intranet, being like, see which of your colleagues are using social media at MuckRack.com. And then being in New York at the time, I'd run into all these PR people and they'd all be like, oh, you're the guy who does MuckRack. Like, I love that site. I'm using it to figure out who to pitch. It's so much more up to date than anything else I can find. I get all this great context about the journalists because you have their latest stories, their tweets, etc. So I realized like, oh, that's interesting. There's, we have this professional use case. We already were known with the PR community and we already had the data they wanted. The only thing that we hadn't done was actually build tools to let them access it the way that they wanted, and to build a software product that we could charge for so we could have a sustainable business model. So then by late 2011, we relaunched MuckRack and we kept it free for the journalists because they love using the free portfolio pages and discovering each other. And we added on this part for PR professionals to our first product was the media database, this much more dynamic way to find the right journalists to pitch. And that's how we got started with our product for PR folks back in 2011. And then we just kept listening to customers and they told us they wanted better media monitoring solutions, that they wanted better reporting solutions. And we just kept building what our customers told us. And fast forward, over a decade later, the company's grown tremendously, but we're still doing what we did at the start, which is just listening to our customers and constantly innovating.
Yeah, MuckRack has always struck me as different than other media databases, reporter databases. They all start to blend together after a while, right? They all kind of basically do the same thing. You put in a set of criteria, whatever, you get kicked back a list. But MuckRack seems to drill down a little harder on the individual reporter as opposed to the class or the group of reporters. That's just my impression of it. And it leads me to ask, how did you develop that posture in developing the platform? Because finding reporters by name or by subject matter really easy, but getting to the right reporter can be really hard. What's the approach you take at MuckRack to solving that?
Yeah, I think it's that we really flipped it. Like most people in our space, like they start out being like, okay, I'm going to make software I'm going to sell to communications and PR folks. And then, okay, how do I just back up and get some data on journalists? We started with the journalists where we came out and we said, hey, we're a platform for journalists. We're going to make it useful for journalists. And because of that, many journalists use their MuckRack profile. They have a trusting relationship because unlike the legacy tools in our space, they can actually see their own profile. So, you're kind of sketched out if, some software has data on me, but I can't see it. But with MuckRack, it's public. They can see it. They can claim it. They can edit it. They can keep it up to date. They can do whatever they want with it. And in addition to that, we have an editorial team and our own technology that keeps it up to date too and makes life even easier for the journalists so they don't have to update it themselves, but they can if they want. So I think it's just from that kind of the DNA in the company of kind of being journalists first, providing tools for journalists and building trust with journalists gives us a real edge in that sense of having really great data quality and then orienting it all around finding the right journalist as opposed to that all being an afterthought.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, the secret to the success there is having the buy-in from the journalists first. And I'm speaking as a former journalist, as well as someone, a PR person who's been on the other end of the please unsubscribe me from your email list email, which is just PR people. I mean, that we hate getting those, right? Because we know two things. One, we haven't done as good of the research or the list scrubbing as we could have done. And we don't, good PR people don't blast out to lists, right? But we do rely on lists to inform us of, who we're going to and why we're going to them and those kind of things. And so when we get those emails, we cringe because one, we feel like, oh, shoot, we fell down. Two, and I think you can understand this too, is we're really worried about either getting blacklisted or getting a reputation of being a, sprayer and prayer. And you're just sending to people who are irrelevant. We don't want that because that's a waste of everybody's time. So having the journalist invested in the platform, I think, is super important.
Yeah, well said. And, when we came onto the scene, in a way, even though we've been doing this now for, 13 years since we started as a free site and over a decade since we launched our PR tools, we're still the new kids on the block. That we have competitors that have been around for, in one case, over 100 years that started as a phone book. But before we came around, we looked at the software that was out there and it really encouraged bad behavior. So I think, it's both on, I think there's always shared culpability between the professionals and then the tool makers when it comes to things. And we saw that a lot of the software out there before was kind of designed more with a workflow like, hey, you've got a client who's in tech, they're making a new podcast microphone. So, just click and find the 1,000 tech journalists and then, 3 clicks later, you're pitching them all. And the problem is, of course, of those 1,000 people, some of them cover B2B tech, some of them only cover software. And there's probably 3 of them that actually cover, hardware for podcasting. But for those 3 people, it'd be awesome. But because the tools would let the PR pros narrow it down, instead of spending time on those 3 people and really customizing a pitch and making it awesome and telling those journalists why it matters, they're sending out a crappy pitch to a lot of people. So when we were coming in, that was the first problem we really wanted to solve, where we were saying like, well, hey, now we can find journalists instead of just having them tagged by broad beat, which was the status quo when we started with the paid product in 2011. Our premise was you can find the right journalists based on what they're writing about and looking at their past articles and then do a much more customized list. And we made lots of design choices along the way to try to encourage good behavior with PR pros. For example, I think we're the only PR platform where you can't add more than 20 journalists at a time to a media list. And we could have made it so you could add a whole lot more. It's not hard, but we limit it that way to try to encourage the idea that if you're putting together a media list, you need to do it very deliberately. And every now and then we have a user complain about that, but it's kind of like, okay, well, if you want that big media list, what are you doing? Maybe you should think a little bit differently. Just the same too, if you're sending out a pitch through MuckRack, you can connect your inbox, but our software really encourages the user to customize every version of the pitch that's going out and consider for every journalist that's going to what they want the message to say, journalist by journalist. And we don't, to some degree, we gotta let the user do what they want, but it'll send you a warning if you're sending out the same email to a bunch of people without customizing it, like citing like our research reports that journalists are less into that. So those are just a couple examples, but we try our best to design the software to encourage good behavior. So I think 90% of, I meet a lot of PR people doing this job. I 90% of the profession, probably more than that even, wants to do their job well. No one wakes up in the morning and be like, I want to do a crappy job at my crappy job and spam a lot of people and piss a lot of people off. But a lot of people are new to the profession, or they get busy throughout their day, and they're going to do the default behavior that their software encourages them to do. So we try to have healthy defaults.
That's really smart. Have you got feedback from journalists on any of those guardrails that you've put in place, or and the quality of the pitches that they might be getting? Do they know they're getting it through MuckRack, or does it just look like it's coming from the individual?
That's the one of the challenges to get the feedback is it looks like it comes from the individual, and it does, because they're connecting their inbox. So just like the journalist doesn't know if you're using Gmail or Outlook or Apple Mail on your iPhone or Google on your Android device. Like, we're kind of like an email client once they connect to it. So to the journalist, it looks like it came through anywhere. But what the journalists do appreciate is being able to log into their profile. And they can even write their fields in their profile. They can write, like, specify what they do cover and what they don't cover, how they'd like to be pitched. And I think that's what's built a lot of trust with journalists, because they feel like I can actually go into my MuckRack profile and control it and know how I'm being presented, as opposed to all the platforms where it's a black box and they have no idea what data is going on about them.
Yeah, again, we come back to that theme of having the buy-in from the journalists and having the appreciation from the journalists. I mean, the one thing I think that PR people really need to do to be successful is to respect the job that the journalists are doing. And those of us who are former journalists get this, I think, better than others. Appreciate what they're doing, respect what they're doing, and try to put themselves in the shoes of that person. And those are the people, I think, and those are the pitches that I think are more successful. So great to hear that the way you've designed that system respects that as well. I think it's really great. I always love to have a little bit of a conversation about metrics, because I think it's the thing that traditionally PR people have had a challenging time wrapping their arms around. And you can measure your success, 20 ways to Sunday. Do you have a preferred method or even a guideline as to how people can measure metrics, or what's your POV on it?
My thought's always been that I think that where a lot of people go wrong is they start out saying, I want the perfect PR metric. And then they debate over, this PR metric or that PR metric. But I always thought the place to start is to first just say, well, what are the main business metrics? What's this business trying to accomplish at the moment? And then you back out of that, the PR metric. Because for two different businesses, it could be totally different. Like, I'll talk to some customers where they're building a brand and it's, okay, how many articles do we get per month? And we're going to score the articles based on the unique visitors per month at those articles, and how much those articles are shared and how much web traffic that generates, which is all great. And that's something we all support in MuckRack. You can calculate that all. But then I'll talk to other customers. Like, I'll never forget, I was having lunch with one of the heads of PR for one of the biggest banks in the world that uses our software. And she was telling me a good day for her is when they don't get press. Because if you're a huge brand like that, there's always something happening at some branch, or, some reason you're going to have bad press. And a lot of their job is actually to manage, potentially negative press or crisis And there's no win for them to be like, oh, look, we got 50 stories today instead of 40. It's like, hey, we just don't want to attract more, more scrutiny, or we want to, there was what would have been a false story going out, but we got to it fast. So it got corrected quickly and there was no follow-up there. So, again, it's same profession, two different companies, but it's totally different. And I think people forget, really in every business function, there's similar things, right? Like even with accounting metrics, where you have GAAP, generally agreed upon accounting principles, you still would never measure two businesses the same way. Like if a business is in growth mode, like Amazon was for many years, they didn't show a GAAP profit, but they had growth and they had other metrics going on. There are other businesses there where they stagnate and EBITDA matters a lot or cash flow matters a lot, but it all depends on the business. So I think that's where, PR pros can take a cue from other business functions and think like, I think a lot of people in PR, they get kind of intimidated by metrics because it's not the background they come from. And they forget that the metrics, I just talked to so many people in this industry who are like, well, my software spit out these metrics, so I guess it matters. I want it to go up into the right or not. And but you always have to take that step back and say, well, what are we looking to achieve as a business? Then what are the KPIs, the key performance indicators that will matter to that? And then how do I set up my software to give me the metrics I need to know if I'm on track or not?
Yeah, it's a great point that everybody tracks success in a unique way. And it's unique to them. It's what matters to them, whether you're a nonprofit or you're selling a widget or you're running an event, and you've got to track the metrics that really matter to those clients. Wanted to just finish up our conversation today with something that I know is really important to you, the 2023 State of Journalism report that actually just came out in March, right? And there were some interesting findings in there. The one that caught my eye was that 2/3, and I'll let you explain this. 2/3 of journalists said that they were impacted by economic uncertainty, and it's that is troubling to me. Again, as a former journalist, right? But I think as PR people, we want a vibrant, healthy news community to pitch stories to and to work with. And so to hear that statistic come out of there is troubling. But tell us a little bit about that report and some of the other things.
Yeah, I think, that is unfortunately kind of a big challenge in the industry right now, is that there's, the news industry has been challenged for a while with the shift to the internet on their business model. And then I think it's been accelerated by the economic uncertainty. That said, though, in another finding, we found that the majority of journalists are optimistic about the profession. So I think it's good to see that optimism going there. But we found, it's been a big challenge out there. We found a lot of our customers have been relying on MuckRack even more because it's meant more journalists are changing jobs. There's more push towards freelancing or journalists going out on their own and starting Substacks or other newsletters or their own podcasts, which is why we did a big expansion of our podcast directory. So I think it's a definitely like an unfortunate thing in the journalism industry right now, and I think a challenge for society at large. And it's good to see there are people working on solutions and there are new kind of more entrepreneurial options for journalists out there. But I think definitely something to watch as a society. And then I think for PR pros, they need to adapt more in terms of how they think about their pitching strategy and broaden out the outlets that they're pitching. Look at these new outlets, these Substacks, these podcasts, make sure their lists are up to date, and just be a little more agile than they might have had to be in the last few years.
Yeah, it's great that you did that report. I know you do it annually. If people want to get a copy of that report, where can they go to?
Just go to muckrack.com and click through our resources. You can find it there, and I can follow up with some links if you could include them in your show notes or point your listeners to them.
Sounds good. Greg, thanks for sharing all these perspectives We really appreciate it. We're going to segue now into the rapid fire question portion of our podcast. This is where we steal a page from inside the actor's studio, ask our guests a series of rapid fire questions meant to elicit a simple answer and a laugh or two. With your indulgence, Greg, here we go. Rapid fire question number 1. What is your favorite news source? Twitter. All right. The aggregator, is that it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always reading articles, but I often find them first through Twitter. That said, there's a lot of news outlets I love, but I don't like to share favorites because they're all our favorite here at MuckRack.
That's a great point. That's a great point. All right, rapid fire question number 2. What's your favorite social media platform?
Still Instagram. And I guess it feels old fashioned because now it's like TikTok's a thing, but yeah, I've been on Instagram since the start, and it's I probably use Twitter more, but Instagram's a nice escape.
Yeah, I love seeing selfies of my friends. I know people sort of poke fun at selfies, but I love seeing what my friends are doing and where they're going and where they're hanging out, having a good time. Rapid fire question number 3, Greg, coffee or alcohol?
Coffee. We're in the PR business here, right? We got to stay fueled. I've got an espresso machine on my kitchen countertop.
There you go. Can't do without it. Rapid fire question number 4. What's your favorite on the run food?
Empanada.
Oh, haven't had that one before. Where do you get your empanadas?
Anywhere. I'm in Miami now, so everywhere. Even the coffee shop here, they all have empanadas.
Oh, that sounds good. Now you got me hungry. And rapid fire question number 5, Greg, what do you want to be after you finish this career?
In a nice burial spot. Probably be doing it for a long time.
I had someone say that they wanted to be relaxed and wealthy, which is just like the opposite of being in PR. Well, Greg, this has been a great conversation. Please let people know how they can find you and MuckRack online.
Sure. So MuckRack, MuckRack.com, or that's our username on pretty much any social platform. They can find me. I signed up early, so I'm just at Gregory on Twitter or Instagram. On LinkedIn, unfortunately, I wasn't that early. So you just look me up there under my name, Greg Galant. On Facebook under the same name. I'm on Be Real, but I forget my username there. But any of those platforms will work.
Sounds good. Greg, thanks so much for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and TikTok at the PR Podcast. Send us a question or a comment there. Our intro is by Christopher Appold. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out there and hire him for all your photography needs. You can find me online at Jody Fisher on all the socials and on the web at jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.